Welcome to the Into AI Safety podcast, where we discuss the challenges facing the field of AI safety and those who work within it. This show aims to provide the foundation and resources needed to get up to speed on safe and ethical AI. As always, I am your host, Jacob Hames. During the podcast, you may hear this sound, which denotes that I have included at least one link related to the content that preceded the sound. The purpose of this is to allow for citations and providing resources without breaking the flow of conversations. As per usual, items mentioned during asides will have links in the show notes as well. This episode was recorded on January 6th, 2026, and asides were recorded on January 25th, 2026. This week's guest is not only a powerhouse in the AI safety field building world, but he is also the recipient of the AI Safety's Most Disarming Smile Award, which is definitely real and not something I made up. He actually messaged me on the Blue Dot Slack a couple months ago after I shared the interview with Lilianne there, asking if I'd be interested in having him on. It took a minute due to travel and with the launch of MATS 9.0, but we eventually were able to sit down and have a fantastic conversation. Before getting into it though, it's probably important to give a quick primer on what MATS is, as it'll be a focal point of today's episode. MATS, or Machine Learning Alignment and Theory Scholars, is a 3-month bootcamp and research program built to be a launch point for individuals with the aim of making AI safety their career. Fellows work with well-established research mentors on field-leading research and are fully supported during that time to allow them to focus on networking, impact, and research quality. Although it might seem trivial, it actually takes a lot of intentionality and effort to run a high-quality field-building program in a complex space like AI safety, and our guest knows this all too well. In addition to being the co-executive director of MATS, he has a PhD in physics from the University of Queensland, is a re-grantor on the funding platform Manifund, a co-founder and board member of the London Initiative for Safe AI, or LISA, and an advisor to many other field-building efforts in the space. We'll get into how MATS goes about mentor selection, the tricky task of balancing funding needs and independence, what MATS's targets are, and a whole lot more. Before we start, I will mention that our guest pops off a couple times with a bunch of organization names in quick succession. Instead of chiming each of those, I'll let you know now that all of them will be in the show notes. And lastly, as part of my ongoing effort to make this more sustainable and not solely funded by yours truly, there will be a Patreon edit with a couple extra bits for those of you interested. With those things out of the way, I'd like to introduce Dr. Ryan Kidd.
Hi, my name is Ryan Kidd. I am co-executive director at MATS, which is this awesome AI safety field building program for researchers, engineers, and founders. And I have previously, I was a physicist very briefly, and along the way I've helped found and spin up and advise a host of other AI safety startups, such as the London Initiative for Safe AI.
Awesome. And so to kick us off, in one sentence, what's the low-hanging fruit of AI safety field building, and why aren't more people doing it?
Yeah, I think the low-hanging fruit is basically targeting an archetype that I call amplifiers. So we talked about this some 18 months ago in this blog post where we talked about the talent needs of technical AI safety teams, which we determined by surveying like the 31 leaders or hiring managers at all the major AI safety labs at the time. So this is like mostly technical AI safety needs, keep in mind, right? But I think that this amplifier role actually transcends just technical things. And amplifiers, they're people managers, but they're also like have a technical bent. You could see they're analogous to technical program managers or TPMs, but they also take on a variety of roles across the ecosystem.
So you mentioned you were a physicist, you have a PhD in physics, and then like right after that, from what I could tell, you become co-executive director of MATS. How did that happen? How did that come about, and what went into the decision that got you there?
Yeah, so I did a physics PhD in Australia, but I was also running a local EA group for my university for 3-4 years before that. I was very involved in like the Scouts, there's various leadership opportunities there. So I guess I wasn't a stranger to project or people management, in a non-professional setting. But yeah, Mats was my first time doing people management in a professional setting, though we did start off small, right? Like most startups. So I was a participant in the first generation of Mats, Seri Mats, right? Which was, it ended up being 5 different individuals. And so at the pilot program, we're all selected from the first EA Cambridge AI Safety Fundamentals course, what's now Blue Dot Impact. And we did these like 2-month research projects after a 6-week kind of part-time online reading group. It was pretty informal. And during that period, I came to Berkeley and met with the organizers, and I gave them a bunch of recommendations for how I'd run that. They invited me to help run the next one, and they ended up believing. Victor Warlop stayed on to help run one program. Oliver Zhang, the other co-founder, left to found Case with Dan Hendricks, where he is still today, COO. And Christian Smith, my co-director, joined shortly thereafter, and we've been running it since. And I guess I think I've been kind of personal. I think I'm somewhat extroverted. I definitely enjoy working with people. I think research, the kind of research I did my PhD and then a little bit after in terms of the AI safety stuff was like not as people-facing as I wanted. And I do associate somewhat with this amplifier role. I can talk about more what I think makes a great amplifier later if you're interested. But I think, it's just the standard startup story, right? It just so happened that I had like a more research background, and my first startup worked. It actually, I think, works really well, which does happen.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think the way that you introduced that to me also brings into focus, like, you've really been with this from sort of the start of when it became what it is today. Yes, it started before that, but like, this started sort of right at the beginning or right before ChatGPT sort of like launched and really changed things. And, you were talking about Blue Dot Impact and how you did like first informal course that it wasn't even Blue Dot Impact at the time. It was just sort of like a reading group. And, it was really the beginning of changing what I would say is like a very niche focus area into something that is a lot broader and more knowledgeable or known rather to people. So like, how does navigating that transition look? You've been in a position of relative authority like throughout that. How has that looked, and like, what are your, I guess, takes on that period of time?
Yeah, so I'll say it didn't feel like I was in a position of relative authority at the time. I think looking back, I probably was, but I remember back in the summer of 2022, the summer of love, as they called it, when everyone was getting all their projects funding. There was capital everywhere. This was back when, Mats never took any FTX funding, but there was a lot of FTX money floating around from their future fund.
Was.
I don't know, like at that time, everyone was getting their project funded. And I think Mats is one of the few projects that survived from that period and is still flourishing today, because there was a lot of field building projects that were launched around that time.
Typically, the Summer of Love moniker is referencing the peak of hippie culture, which occurred at festivals through 1967, particularly in California, and was known for anti-war sentiment, free love, and psychedelic drug use. Ryan is using this as a cultural touchstone to help describe the vibe with which some people talk and think about this time period in AI safety. The good old days, and ephemeral like lightning in a bottle. So what's he talking about specifically? The unprecedented influx of funding that the space received from the FTX Future Fund during the short time period it existed from February to August of 2022. During that time, FTX provided roughly 132 million USD in funding to various projects, with about 1/4 of that going towards AI safety projects specifically. As we know now, that was largely embezzled money, meaning that many researchers and organizations in AI safety, including the Center for AI Safety and even Apart Research, benefited significantly from FTX's fraud, although they did so unwittingly. It's worth noting that Anthropic was probably the most aided in this way. Bankman-Fried led their Series B funding round in April of 22 with over 500 million USD in exchange for an 8% stake in the company. The mandatory sale of these shares during FTX's bankruptcy made up a majority of creditor repayment.
I think if I'm to think about why we survived, I think Matt's has been particularly like my strong will here, and Christians too, is that like we really want to do things like the right way, and we aren't super keen on violating a bunch of social mores. Like we think having a HR department is a good thing. I think like there's some field building projects that are like, oh man, like we don't want to put too many restrictions on the way, but no, we think like having a community health policy is very important. So Matt's has avoided, I think, a bunch of, potential problems that way by having a great community health policy, making sure our fellows and mentors feel safe and supported, which is, a challenge, but that's been a huge focus of our program. And I think the second, probably more important thing from a survival standpoint is from the very beginning, I tried very hard to elicit, understand the underlying mechanisms by which, OpenPhil, now Coefficient Giving, was making funding decisions and replicate them ourselves. In fact, build a better prioritization apparatus for the goals they want, sort of like imitative generalization, And we did that by assembling a mentor selection committee, which we still use to this day, that comprises like all the top experts that Coefficient Giving did and would consult to make funding decisions. So we just like explicitly based our mentor portfolio on those top expert advisors. And then, of course, Coefficient Giving gave us more and more just they really liked our system. So they gave us more funding over time. And I think that ended up really well for us.
Gotcha. Okay, so I guess from my perspective, and I don't know if you've like listened to any of the podcast before, but I take I guess in a more skeptical view in general, and the red flag or orange flag maybe that I hear in that is like we base our who we're choosing mentors on entirely on how we're getting funding. And while that is
no, not at all
good for getting funding, okay, so then can you like give me a little bit of context there, maybe how I misinterpreted that?
Yeah, so it's a fairly interesting point though. So in the early days of Matt's, I think it is true to say that Coefficient Giving, our grant managers there was a lot more discussion and back and forth about the kinds of research that they wanted to support, because this was like it was before the money really started flowing, before people really, OpenPhil and Coefficient Giving really kind of, I suppose in a way, woke up to AGI. Like everyone just woke up to the nearness of AGI. So, but in those early days, it was kind of like more skeptical, and we were sort of an unknown quantity. Though I think having a PhD myself helped a lot, and then I think having strong connections with a bunch of the grant makers and the org leaders and stuff that I built by moving to Berkeley and going to all the retreats and just trying to really establish those strong personal connections. But I think that like actually the way that we, for the last at least 2.5 years, have been making our mentor selection decisions has been like almost like we are sort of a re-grantor in a sense. So Coefficient Giving like trusts our process, okay, which is not something that we like consult them on. I actually think like other funders beyond Coefficient Giving have been more selective, I think, about the kind of research they want us to support, which is partly because they see somewhat their entire existence and their purpose. I'm just like things like Longview, philanthropy, perhaps the Navigation Fund, and a few others. Like they're trying to fill in the gaps that Coefficient Giving has left, and they find it really hard to find gaps. It is not at all easy to find things worth funding that Coefficient Giving hasn't funded. Is a strong claim that I will make.
After we wrapped recording, Ryan brought up this interaction specifically and asked that I clarify his stance, as he thought it came out a bit different than he intended. A more accurate version of his claim is that close to all clearly legible efforts worth funding, according to the values the funder is looking to support, have been, but there are systematically neglected areas which don't have good credit assignment mechanisms. As someone who hasn't received funding from the funder formerly known as Open Philanthropy, I do largely agree with this claim, with one modification of changing clearly legible to seemingly legible. But I also think it isn't a particularly interesting claim. For a funding organization who isn't funding constrained, it would be concerning if this statement weren't true. But maybe that's a good thing. Ryan sees this as guidance for how applicants can better secure grants. If you can clearly understand the funder or VC's priorities, then you can better convince them that your product, intervention, or research will help them achieve those goals. It's not just about the idea, though. You also have to convince them that you're competent enough to achieve the desired outcome. So prior success stories, past work, and even strong first impressions go a long way. While I do agree that these are certainly ways to increase your chances, I do also think that there is a significant social aspect of this game that can't be understated. The gaps in the funding landscape, then, are both for the areas which don't have good credit assignment mechanisms, as Ryan says, but also the areas which do not seem worthwhile according to the funder's values. In a healthy ecosystem of funders, this wouldn't be a problem. But when one source of funding dominates all others in the space, it means that one ideology, which in this case is quite susceptible to developing its own echo chamber, has a monopoly on agenda setting. But that's just my take. I think that's interesting, though, because I don't get to hear that perspective as often because I'm not in the Berkeley bubble, so to speak, right? I live in Colorado, and the organizations I work for are fully remote global, and I do think there is something to be said for just being there, and the value that has. I don't like it personally for a number of reasons, but I do think that there is something there.
Oh, there's huge value in being you see, this is bigger than AI safety, right? This is if you want to work in acting, you go to LA.
Yeah.
If you don't go to LA, you're a fool,
Yeah.
If you want to work in finance, you go to New York or so. Yeah. These kind of micro things pop up. So I guess that's the Bay, that's London, that's DC. Maybe to a lesser extent, there are some other hubs out there. But I think, it is interesting. So I do think there are a lot of things that are not getting funded that should get funded. I think that part of the problem here is not necessarily a lack of money. It's clearly not this. I think it's the same thing with other VC ecosystem stuff, right? Mm-hmm. So the various teams at Coefficient Giving that have very different mandates for the things they want to fund. And it's the same with VC. Sometimes it's hard to actually work out how to get into that advisor network. And I think an easy way for researchers is just publish an amazing paper with great citations, get a great reference from your top researcher. Easy. When it comes to founders of AI safety projects, it is not at all clear. I mean, it's easy to work out ex ante how you might become a top researcher candidate. It's there's a standard path that academia has laid out or something.
Yeah, there's
in the
an
case of founders,
path,
I think that it's not clear. Yeah.
No,
a hard path to be clear. Yeah.
Yes. What would you recommend then, what do you see as a path for founders or how we could make that, what is the missing piece there? Or, what is a path that does exist that maybe isn't as obvious, but, already does have some of that scaffolding and infrastructure there?
That's a really good question. It is something I've been trying to solve. Right, this problem of getting founders the visibility and the accreditation that they need to get funding from nonprofit donors and confidence and buy-in with Catalyze Impact. So I've been advising Catalyze Impact for years. That's Alexandra Boss, and so that is an incubator for AI safety nonprofits. We now also have Selden Lab, right? They've run their first cohort as well. They have some fantastic, both these have had fantastic projects. Constellation is spinning up an incubator. We have like, Y Combinator already exists. A couple of Mats alums founded startups like Theorem and like Atla AI through that. Entrepreneur First, Defensive Acceleration. So basically, we just need more startup accelerator kind of programs. Now, for nonprofits, right? Typically, you're not going to like if Catalyze Impact's a nonprofit, it's not going to take a cut of your funding, right? Because that's not its business model, especially if you're founding a nonprofit like Apollo Research or Timaeus or something. What you really need, right, is you need like references, okay? And that's why a lot of Mats alums, I think, have been successful, other than the fact that they're over-determined to be great researchers and generally effective, is that they get the references from the top advisors, and this is really a research kind of ecosystem. So the top researchers are also kind of the top advisors in a strategic sense often. And they get like the credible outputs, and then maybe they like get some initial seed funding. And then the way that like a lot of these big nonprofit funders work, right, is they'll like give you, I don't know, 3 to 6 months of seed funding to, get some MVP going.
Gotcha. And do you see, I mean, you mentioned this kind of earlier, like, if you're an actor, you go to LA. Do you think that we're in a similar, I guess, regime here where it's like, if you're really serious about AI safety, you go to the Bay Area. And if that is the case, what do you think the consequences or repercussions of that would be?
So I do think we are in a similar thing. I think that if you work out of Constellation or Lisa in London, or Far Labs also in Berkeley, or now there's some other things popping up like Mox in San Francisco. If you work out of these office spaces, you have vastly greater exposure to a bunch of illegible knowledge that doesn't get published anywhere because, I don't know, maybe there'd be PR considerations. Like people can't say their honest beliefs about some of the AI safety things because that would look bad. Or I don't know, people form personal relationships. We're humans, like this kind of conversation matters in a way that impersonal writing on a blog doesn't, So I think if you're in the US and you want to get a job in AI technical safety, move to the Bay. It's just a no-brainer, I think. Obviously, it's going to be very expensive, so not everyone can even afford to do that, and that's tough. But there are, grant transition funding opportunities, like there's career transition funding from Coefficient Giving, LTFF, and so on. Collider. Yeah. So these things take a while to accrue. And there aren't always going to be specializations in certain cities. But I do think, you can really get a leg up if you move there. But I think, like I said, Summer of Love 22, everyone moved to the Bay. Everyone came to the Bay for summer. Very few people got jobs. It was just 2 years too soon or something.
Gotcha. So, I mean, from my perspective, as someone who for various reasons, I either can't or don't want to move to the Bay Area, but I'm still dedicated and want to be contributing in this space. And so, I mean, to people who are like that, is it just sort of like a tough luck? Is there a solution there? What do you think about that aspect?
Well, I think for people who can get into programs like Mats, Astra, or if you're going to London, Pivotal, Laser Labs, there are great opportunities. You can go there, stay there for 3 months, and then go back home. And you've acquired a large part of the benefit of exposure to those ecosystems just from visiting there and meeting all the right people. Even your cohort probably is as valuable as the other things, right? But you gain a lot from that experience, and then you can bring that home and start your own local chapter or hub or whatever. Separately, I think that there are remote programs that are really good. So we have things like SPAR, Supervised Program for Alignment Research, has been really killing it. And of course, Blue Dot Impact, this fantastic decentralized AI safety course ecosystem. So these provide a large benefit. And I try and to the extent I can, go into these communities and offer advice and stuff like that. But it is tough to it is tough to gain the same benefits because it's not just if I try my best to go into attend SPAR career fairs or something, at best I can meet with all the people in that. right? So that's 1x 300. So let's say I get 300 meetings. I can't even do that. Let's say I can. That is nowhere near as many connections as if those 300 people came to the Bay and met 1,000 other people, right? All those possible connections that could form. So you just can't really replicate that in the same way unless you have, I guess, big online roundtables between, say, 300 participants or something. But then, of course, like those are all new participants, and all the seasoned researchers would then also have to take part to make it really worth their while, which is why it's just hard to replicate things. You have to get buy-in from the people whose time is super valuable. So you're always going to have gated access communities, some physical, some reputation based online. Yeah.
And so, I mean, related to the idea of like getting buy-in, and you've made a post about this before, you've talked about this, and you even mentioned earlier, like you've recruited mentors, and the mentor recruitment process that you have is incredibly intentionally thought out. That's great. How did you get there? Because like, how would you start that from a third-party perspective? How would you get that buy-in? Mainly for mentors is what I'm talking about, but even for other things, you know, like how do you bootstrap that the way that you guys have?
Yeah, so like the first MATS program that so I was in charge of mentor selection for MATS 2. Just been at MATS 1, in charge of mentor selection for MATS 2. I picked people like, so Evan Hubinger was the original MATS mentor, so I'd read tons of his work and Paul Cristiano in my first MATS tenure, and that was massively influencing me. And mostly I selected people who I'd read the writing of, you know, that had like, and really seemed to impact me in that first cohort, or who were kind of hanging around the light cone offices at the time, which is where I was hanging out in early 22. So like Alex Gray as an example there. And I thought about this, like post the program, I was like, man, this just seems like a very arbitrary way to determine, the future of AI safety, particularly as like we had 30 participants. And I was like, wow, okay, this is scaling faster than I thought. We got funding for 60. And I was like, wow, okay, we really have to think hard about how we're going to do this, because there could be some serious repercussions from steering the field in the wrong direction. You know, there was a memo that went around called Against Current Mass Movement Building. And it said like, one, low quality talent is bad because it dilutes, you know, the community, and like maybe, you know, we're too early, too young in AI safety to like bring in a bunch of people who don't know what they're talking about, because on net they'll like publish bad ideas, then the public will take that up, and et cetera. I don't know. I have disagreements with that. But the second thing was basically it matters, like there's massive founder effects in how you start off, what research directions you emphasize. So I thought like, okay, what's the best mechanism I know of to elicit top, to help steer this field? And I was like, well, clearly, wisdom of the crowds is something, I generally believe in. What's even better than wisdom of the crowds? Maybe wisdom of the crowds that have thought about it a really long time. And there are certain situations where, you'll see like in prediction markets, sometimes like expert opinion beats out like public opinion. Sometimes the converse is true. So I guess what I was trying to imagine was like, who are the AI safety equivalents of top expert forecasters, And so we made a list and we consulted those people. We said, hey, who are the top researchers we should work with? Then we reached out to all those researchers and more, and then asked those advisors, okay, what do you think about these people's applications, like their research experience, their actual projects that they're particularly interested in. And as time has gone on, we've now got 275 mentors applied for summer. That's so many. We had to reject like 80%. How do you do that? We got 30 advisors to review them. We accepted the top 10% unconditionally, knocked off the bottom 40% unconditionally, give or take. And then everyone in the middle, which is about half of all mentors we accepted, we made decisions according to like our own, we had some data such as like for returning mentors, did they get great ratings or bad ratings, from the people that they supervised and the MAT staff that work with them. So they were either in or out based on that. And for new mentors, like, okay, so we're trying to have a diverse enough portfolio to cover a bunch of different stuff. And we like wrote down all the agendas that we thought were topical and interesting and merited some, kind of boost, right? Because a lot of MATS's history has been about, on the margins, boosting marginal agendas. even if it's not most of our portfolio, it's like combined, like maybe you want to have like 20 different moonshot bets, and that's actually like if you add those up, that's like a lot of your portfolio, right? And so we found those bets and we added them in, and then made the rest of the picks based on merit.
Gotcha. Okay. I think that's helpful for me as well, just to like myself. I mean, this is not a trivial effort. You guys put a lot of work back then at the beginning and now into mentor selection, and I think that's an important part to like make sure is clear. Because it's not like necessarily trivial to just say, oh, I know some people who have good credentials on paper. I'll start a fellowship and it'll work perfectly from the start. So when thinking about how you choose these mentors, how you choose the projects, and even on a more meta level, the strategy of Mats as a whole, how do you go about doing that? How do you incorporate people from your team, like you mentioned earlier, and also make sure that it's in the direction that you're wanting to go as an organization? How do you define that?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, some of that is human resources, other that is information flows, right? So until recently, Daniel Filan, a senior research manager at Mats, was in charge of mentor selection. So he and I would meet weekly. We'd talk about, and Daniel, if you don't know him, is the host of the AXRP podcast. He likes to say he was the first person to start a PhD in AI safety at Center for Human Compatible AI at UC Berkeley. So he's been in the space for a long time. He has a lot of knowledge. He's very broad. He's also somewhat contrarian. And yeah, like we shared a lot of intuitions about how to design a good selection process. So I built the first version. He took that over and made it much better. He ran it for the last year and a half, I believe. And now he's left to, he has a new job now, which is very sad, but it was wonderful working with him. And now Juan Gil on our team is going to be in charge of this process. And so he's our new program lead. And yeah, I guess like the way that I built the process like this concept of a chain of trust, right? If I can't actually directly assess, maybe this is something that's like really hard to assess, right? The impact of it, but I believe that this like group of experts is probably like the best governing body to assess that. Well, I put my faith in them, right? They're the next link in the chain. Okay, maybe that group of experts, these mentor selection committee members, maybe they like don't actually know how to pick, like, or they don't have the kind of wherewithal to pick the scholars that enter Mats. Okay, so they pick the top mentors with some input from Mats. Okay, so then the mentors, right, pick the top scholars or fellows, whatever, with some input from Mats. So at every stage, we've kind of like deferred to the local expert, and so that's the main process behind this our selection process. Now, of course, you want to have checks, so you want to like have a feedback loop, right? You want to like look at the impact of your actions on the world, maybe do some type of A/B testing. Luckily, we're a big enough program, we can see the A/Bs in the different types of people's selection processes, right? We've never had a homogeneous selection process across Mats. It's always been mentor-based, right? Different mentors have different needs, and that's been like the core of Mats, right? But we can also assess the impact in the world of the research the org's founded, the placements, like the take-up of that research into policy or in shaping agendas or hiring practices or whatever. And so we've been like studying that whole feedback loop for years, and I don't know, have some takes, but maybe not as strong as I'd like, because it is still hard to see the counterfactuals, in many ways. And of course, like internally to Mats for strategic communication, like we have like open access to our project docs. All team members can comment and review. We have biweekly team meetings where we share key strategic updates. Like I'll give the strategic updates about Mats and the AI safety field, and other team leads will share like the main things they're contributing to, and we try and publish as many internal strategic memos as possible. So I write like tons of memos, and I give lightning talks every week as well during the program, just trying to communicate my ideas. It's like Cunningham's law, which I think is like, if you're wrong, put it on the internet and someone will tell you. So I tend to try and do that too with some less wrong posts and tweets and the like. but also like much higher bandwidth communication shared internally and Matt's via memos and team updates.
Gotcha. And you mentioned then just last thing on like I guess Mats itself. Mats has it sounds like a couple targets. Placements was one of them. Like uptake of the research. I guess maybe explicitly what are those, and how did you get to them? Do you have a core one that you care about more? Yeah, what are your thoughts on sort of like targets, I guess, of the organization?
Yeah, so I mean, I would say the actual North Star of what we're trying to do is, reduce catastrophic risk from AI, make AI go well, as we like to say. This
Hmm.
is super hard to evaluate. On the day to day, like the
Yeah.
actual way we do this is broken down via this chain of trust, right? With these kind of local goals. So, like we want to in mentor selection, right, which is the first link. That is like leveraging the mentor selection committee and our own team members' knowledge and past ratings of mentors and so on to pick like the people who will, have the best chance of reducing catastrophic risk from AI. Okay, as researchers and mentors.
Hmm.
And then the next
Hmm.
step is like the scholar or fellow selection, in which case, we leverage the mentor's expertise and also a bunch of proxies that we have built over the years, and things like coding tests, like Code Signal for some mentors, and for the ideally like specialized selection problems and processes. Like as an extreme example, Neil Nanda's like 10-hour, neck and terp kind of work test
Yeah.
thing that he gets people to do, um, which is like a lot of effort, but is extremely good at picking out very, very good people, I think. Um,
Hmm.
and yeah, and so that process, we kind of chaperone that process and try and reduce the load for mentors as much as possible. Um, so that is the main thing we're actually optimizing for in terms of what our decisions are based around. In terms of checks, right? There are useful proxies that we can get. So
Hmm.
placements at organizations. Okay, what are the best organizations? What matters? Well, let's ask our mentor selection committee. You know, so they have their
Hmm.
takes about the best research agendas and stuff. Um, Not perfect, but there's something there. Um, we can also,
Hmm.
of course, look at the size of organizations. You can look at maybe Coefficient Giving has an independent and somewhat independent, somewhat good, credit assignment process which they use to determine funding. VCs, maybe not. It's hard to say that the market cap of AI companies is a good proxy for like how well they're helping the world. uh, I don't know. I
Yeah.
don't think. Yeah, I'm not that capitalist. um, yeah, so there are some things you can do. The organization's founded, same metrics you can apply there. In terms of research, you can look at like there's trivial stuff like citation, which is a good measure of academic impact. Is accepted at external,
Hmm.
but you can also look at stuff like which we haven't built a proper process for this, which is
Okay.
like you can get your committee of advisors to sort of like assign ELOs to papers, via pairwise comparisons. You can imagine like a research ELO ranking system, or at very least people could talk about their favorite
Yeah.
papers. We have got people to elicit,
Hmm.
in some cases, their favorite papers, and we have built a selection of like big wins out of that. Um, but yeah, we haven't done this thoroughly yet.
Nice. Oh, that's really interesting. I feel like that would be. I mean, that could be its own research paper, right? Like,
Yeah.
here's this. Yeah, could be cool. Awesome. So, like, I guess now I want to shift gears a little bit to talk more about the AI safety talent pipeline as a whole, as opposed to like math specifically, and then your perspectives on that, and also when it becomes relevant, how maths fits into it. But like a a key thing that I think a lot of people have said, and I know you've acknowledged as part of like even math strategy, is to cast like a very wide net when it comes to um, trying to recruit people. So making that net as wide as possible so you capture as many people, and then you provide support to the strongest ones. And the concern I have is that this can neglect the like externality of the wide net, um, in that there are a lot of individuals. So let's say, someone like me who isn't going to move to the Bay Area, at least in the immediate future, and I can't then necessarily get the support, but I've been sort of like brought into this in a way. I've been convinced that this is a problem that I should be supporting and working on. But I can't necessarily in the way that I feel like I can, and I feel like I should be able to. And so I guess I'm curious about your thoughts on that, and like if I'm missing something there, or how you think about that, and how that sort of plays into some of the strategy here.
Yeah, that's a really good question. Okay, so first off, I'll say MATS has always allowed remote participants. We've never tried to discriminate against remote participants. We just think that like being in person is so much better for development as a researcher. Even if people can come,
Right.
if they can come to the program for like a week, we'll pay for flights. You know, because we think, you know, depending on the week, like we want it to be like a good week, like the first week or the last one, right, the symposium.
Yeah.
But we've always had that, and we also, of course, have scholars based in Berkeley, but also in London, right, our two hubs, and we've now added Washington D.C. as a third location. And mainly it's like we want to save on costs. Like we don't want to support people going to an office space anywhere because that would cost a lot of money, and that would be probably not that impactful relative, to coming to the base. We want to incentivize it somewhat. Okay, secondly, all right. So one of the key elements of MATS strategy that we've always pushed for is we are picking the best people. We're not picking the people that we can have the largest delta for. We're picking the people that we can accelerate fastest into research lead and field building roles that can increase the carrying capacity of the ecosystem. What that means is from the very beginning, like I've been advising, I helped Agus and Neve when they were like taking over and launching SPAR. I've helped. I advise Pivotal Research. I advise Catalyze Impact. BASE, this new Black and AI Safety and Ethics Fellowship. I'm one of the advisors there. So, and we've always tried and publish our MATS stuff, and we share mentor. Like the mentors that don't make the cut that are over our Excellence Bar, of which there are, like at least 100, maybe 150. I've shared those the last 2-3 years with as many programs as I can find that seem like they're doing the right thing. What we're trying to do with MATS is not be like gatekeepers necessarily. We're trying to be amplifiers of people that we think have the best chance of going out into the world and staffing these other programs. Many MATS scholars or fellows have been AI Safety Camp mentors during the program or immediately after in the extension. The same with SPAR, which offer kind of like this lower commitment mentorship opportunity, right? So they're gaining experience as research leads, as team leads and advisors. So MATS is trying to empower those individuals because we still think mentorship is the main bottleneck in AI safety, right? So from that perspective, I do see it as MATS's job to help the whole distribution as much as possible. Obviously, there's some cutoff, there's some minimum level of ability that is generally sufficient for working in AI safety, and probably it's going to be kind of high. I think that's just the case with some of this knowledge work. But that's not to say that yeah, maybe that's the technical AI safety stuff or the very, but there are tons of opportunities for people who have less technical ability, but are really skilled as communicators or operators or so on. And I see these all the time in the 80,000 hours job board. And I think there should be more opportunities for people with different skill distributions. Does that shed some light on the strategy?
The post Ryan is referring to is one that he and some others on the MATS team wrote back in May of 2024. In it, they defined 3 archetypes: iterators, amplifiers, and connectors, as a way to categorize the strengths needed in the AI safety landscape. Connectors are the individuals who launch entirely new areas of research or significantly change contemporary understanding. These are your Albert Einsteins. Iterators are characterized by their ability to develop and learn from fast feedback loops, kind of like the Wright brothers. And lastly, we have the amplifiers, communicators and people managers with enough context to support others in the most effective manner. kind of like David Letterman, although admittedly I had a kind of difficult time finding the perfect touchstone for that one. As mentioned in the post, it's impossible to bucket humans in this way, no matter how we slice it. But it's a framing that the Matt's team from 2024 used to help them make sense of the AI safety talent landscape, and it was an effective tool. That should get you caught up enough for this conversation. Yeah, no, I think that's helpful, and also provides some context as well of like, what the end goal is for you guys and how that plays into it. So, and this sort of gets into the next section, which you mentioned earlier, about the amplifiers. So, from what I heard just now in that sort of description was you want to get the people who potentially they're the other sort of like archetypes as well, which I think are like iterators or ideators or something like that.
Connectors, iterators, amplifiers.
Connectors, that's what it was. So the role that you see Matt's holding, at least moving forward, is getting people to be in those amplifier roles as then maybe the other people who didn't make that cut, I guess, to get into the program can still participate because you're developing a broader ecosystem by creating those amplifiers. Does that match what you were saying, or am I misunderstanding?
Yeah, I think like the archetype of amplifiers I normally conceive of it is a bit different than like this research lead or mentorship type of role that I'm describing with
okay.
which is I think is the main benefit of this very tail heavy selection process, right, where we're prioritizing excellence and minimizing time to impact or time to research lead or something versus maximizing the delta that a program can provide. Like these are so that's different because like those people are going on to roles that are very technical. Amplifiers, that kind of role, like relatively few of our fellows have taken on, or alumni have taken on amplifier-shaped roles. Some have, right? We have on our team, Claire Short was a Mats alum who joined our team as a research manager. She's clearly in an amplifier role. We had like Kai Kozranek. He's another guy. He helped co-found Catalyze Impact. Now I think he's working at General GPAI Lab. So there are people out there who've done this, like Claire as well. Worth noting, she founded Athena, this mentorship program for women, which was great. Well, though I don't believe that's happening at the moment. And so I think like the amplifier skill set is like a little bit different. Certainly, like people with technical backgrounds like myself, and Claire have like gone into these amplifier roles. But you also find plenty of people who never did a PhD, never did a master's degree in a technical subject, who are just like great amplifiers because they have the networking skills and the people skills. They have enough of a technical context, or perhaps even have a technical co-founder that they can, successfully kind of navigate the very technical, jargony application process for funding and for getting, credible mentors or whoever people to buy into their project. So I think like in terms of building amplifiers, right, there's not like a clear mechanism for this in the field today. I think like it's the same as like startup founders in some sense. There are people who kind of like complete the gauntlet, and they get funding or not. But I think like we have now more programs dedicated to AI safety startup founders like Catalyze and Selden, like I said, than we have amplifier-shaped programs. Okay, what makes a great amplifier? I've danced around this. I think amplifiers, yeah. Do you have takes, actually? I'd be curious.
Oh, no, I was just saying, like, that was the next question that I wanted to ask. I do have takes. I would also see myself as an amplifier. But I'd like to hear yours first. You're the guest after all.
Okay. Oh, thank you. Yeah, so there's three words that I like to use to describe amplifiers. I say they're plural, liminal, and relational. So they're plural in that they do a bunch of different things. right? They're jack of all trades. They do management. They have some like technical understanding as well. Maybe they do communications or strategy, operations. They like have a bunch of different things under their belt. They're liminal in that they're like much more technical than usual ops or communications or HR roles, right? They like have they can actually read papers, for instance, and understand what's going on there. But they're less technical in terms of the role they do than research roles, right? They're not actually necessarily in the guts of language models. And they're also relational in that their outcomes are typically grounded in how others are benefited. So yeah, this maybe there's like a whole spectrum of amplifier-shaped people, but the kind I'm talking about is the kind that is in very high demand by these technical AI safety organizations that need managers and need kind of people operations, staff, and all these kind of things to help scale their organization.
Gotcha. So would you say then that the untapped role maybe for this like flavor of person is more a like ops role, and potentially just like the stigma maybe around ops in this space has like caused less people to be applying for these than might otherwise? Or like what's your reasoning there, or not reasoning but like thought process there?
It's interesting you say that because Matt's recently hired like something like 2 to 3% of our operations applicants for our roles. So we're getting a lot of operations applicants. And like I think all our team members are fantastic. I'm not even exaggerating. I think we have an exceptional team, and our operations team is no exception. 2 to 3% is pretty low. So I don't know. So maybe there is a big stigma around operations roles, but it doesn't seem to have manifested in changes to how many applicants Matt's is getting from qualified operations people. Maybe that's because maybe this wasn't the case 2 years ago.
Those operations people, they fit that amplifier role of like they can read the okay, so that's what I'm trying to identify here. I guess what I'm saying is that like the people who are amplifiers, maybe they should be applying for more of these ops roles than they are, because I do think that there is a stigma around if you feel like you have spent time in doing upskilling and learning technical aspects. So maybe you have software engineering experience, maybe you've done a master's in some sort of machine learning or otherwise related thing. There is this implicit stigma around taking an ops role. And like I've even mentioned this on a previous podcast with Liliane, who does a lot of that flavored stuff at Blue Dot Impact. And we mentioned to each other like, yeah, you say you do ops for this organization, and you just sort of watch their facial expression like deflate a little bit. And so
that's unfortunate.
I think, yeah, I agree. But I do think that is part of the reason why we're not seeing these amplifiers apply for those roles. Because maybe, I think as someone who's done the hiring process and sort of projecting as well, we want those kinds of people to apply for these roles. It's just very difficult to find someone who will, I guess.
Oh yeah, I have a lot to say. I do think there's a meaningful difference between the optimal operations person for most of the operations roles I'm conceiving of. And I don't just mean at Matt's, I mean in the broader AI safety ecosystem or tech in general, and this amplifier role. I think they're quite different.
Okay.
So I think the closest analog to amplifier in the tech industry is a TPM, a technical program manager. Now you could call this operations, but I think you'd be making the same sin that most effective altruists have been making for 5 years or something, which is calling everything that isn't research operations. I think operations as a category, I think operations as a category is a bit more narrow than that, at least in my ontology. And it's like notably, while plenty of our operation team can read ML papers and do for fun, they don't typically have the level of ML research experience or engineering experience that a TPM does. So TPMs typically have some amount of technical experience, like if you're a TPM for a software engineering team and you don't know how to code, you're gonna have a bad time. Maybe you don't have to code that much in your day job, but you have to understand, like what goes into the coding process. You have to be able to like work with the engineers. So it's liminal. It is between those operations roles and research roles. It's right in the gap. And I think that like you can have people who have operations kind of spec'd in terms of their history, spec into these kind of TPM roles and maybe do some technical upskilling. That's great. You can also have people with research backgrounds like myself spec into these amplifier roles, and there are examples of both. You can join a great organization that's very like a high functioning organization, and you can pick up great operation skills from being on that team. I think like for technical skills, typically there is a large amount, like you need to like really be touching grass in terms of AI models or like technical degrees or something, like quite a lot. I think technical skills are just harder to pick up on the job or something. And so that's why I think you see most of these TPM or amplifier types, they're like researchers who burned out from research or something, like myself. And maybe they're like more extroverted and they like working with people and they have good people skills and they found their niche, That's the kind of thing I'm angling at here. Yeah. And so if you look at the backgrounds of most MATS research managers, as an example, like they come from a variety of different things, but mostly they have some academic experience. They have done AI safety research before. They're data scientists. Some of them, a few of them have been product managers, but they come from tech startups, from consulting, from research academic positions. So it's like a bit different than like our operations staff. Typically, they've been doing operations at like effective companies. And in many cases, like some of them have like founded their own companies, but it's typically not been like research or data science-y kind of roles, which is more of what we would see from the research managers.
Do you think that the like misnaming of using ops for anything that's not research has contributed to this problem in ways?
Yes.
And like why and how, basically?
Definitely has. Yeah, I think people should reclaim the title of operations. Like what but that said, like operations is like a criminally undefined word. Operations is what makes your organization operate. Okay, well that changes based on what your organization does. But I think AI safety is kind of interesting, right? I wrote a blog post about this recently called "AI Safety Undervalues Founders," and I highly encourage people to read that. Some of my messages in there were like, man, it seems kind of crazy that like there's such a huge status gradient towards being an academic or a researcher in AI safety field that like even founders of great projects, and I was like, kind of pointing myself a little, but also at a lot of people I know who founded great field building projects or other things that aren't themselves doing research and get like very low credit for the things they've done. And I think this is beyond founders. This is also operations people. My team have said like, yeah, I went to like X AI safety hub, like this office or whatever, and as soon as I told people I was doing operations, their face fell. You shared a similar story. I think that's crazy. It should be like it's an impact-oriented field. People don't understand operations is really hard to do well. Great operations people make or break your organization. There is this kind of elitist academic culture I have noticed, and I think like one of the things that we do in MATS to try and mitigate this is we try and give people across the team, the ability to contribute to strategy, to write memos, to comment on things, just like have a very, very level playing field in terms of, who gets to offer feedback. Obviously, there are some problems of salaries, right? Because the market for operations salaries is typically much lower than technical salaries. So we just go off the market on this. Though obviously we offer internal incentives to people to take on project management, right? Which is itself like quite a level up in terms of usefulness and ability. And then I think like the way that we do things like lightning talks, our weekly sessions in the program, our operations staff regularly get up to say cool lightning talks. And I think that has an impact on how people regard them. And in general, I think that people in the program, like, I could be wrong, but I think if you ask any of my ops or community staff, they would say like, yeah, like we feel respected by fellows. I'm not sure you would get the same answer if you went to certain AI safety hubs and asked the same question. Yeah, there is a bit of a pernicious thing happening here. Part of it, I think, is maybe unintentionally caused by podcasts like 80,000 Hours, only interviewing researchers. Kind of a wild trend, right? There are plenty of other people to interview, but they tend to only interview researchers. Maybe I'm overgeneralizing, but yeah.
No, yeah, I definitely think that's true. I think, at least from my perspective, from like the content creation, it's easier to interview a researcher because you can target a thing that they've just put out and be like, okay, this is then it themes the episode by default. You don't have to do as much I guess planning around here's what the arc looks like, here's what we want to talk about. So it is just like easier when that is the case. I think it's very much worthwhile to do that, obviously, to do that extra work to have conversations with people who wouldn't otherwise get to have appearances and stuff, because I think it's really important to share the perspective and the work that you're doing. Like, I think a lot of what you've already talked about in this interview is really helpful for me as well, as someone who is, starting my own thing, or has been starting. It's been going for multiple years now. Yeah. So I think that's really valuable. And I want to say also, I appreciate the pushing back against some of those, seemingly established norms, in some of these spaces, because I feel like that is hard to do often. So I think that's great.
I got a lot of backlash from my AI Safety Undervalues founders less wrong post. You can read some of the comments. People are like, we don't want more founders, or hey, we're all for founders, but like founders should also be on less wrong all the time and should be like amazing researchers too, or something.
While I do think it's worth checking out the article itself if you're interested, I totally acknowledge that very few have the time to read through the pages of comments on it. So I did it for you as a labor of love. In terms of engagement with the main idea presented by Ryan, that is, that founders of AI safety organizations should have more encouragement and support, concerns raised included that boosting founders is more likely to have unintentional negative impacts at large scales because of the multiplicative impact that starting an organization can have. For example, OpenAI was once a safety-conscious startup, but now they are seen relatively universally as a lab against the interests of AI safety, at least on the whole. Another point which was brought up was that research understanding is critical for founders to have. I do agree with this to an extent. There's a reason that I have continued to contribute to research directly while doing the podcasts. But I don't see this as being incompatible with Ryan's stance. The main backlash, I guess, that is, the most upvoted item in the thread, seems to me to be much more about Matt's than makes sense. It directly attacks Ryan, saying, quote, Matt's biggest problem is roughly that approximately no one on the staff is a great researcher yourself, end quote. And Matt's, with the core argument being that the program has been producing fewer scholars that are aligned with what that specific individual sees as valuable. In addition to that being a red flag kind of stance, it seems to me that it actually supports Ryan's argument that AI safety undervalues founders and overvalues pure researchers. Here is someone in the community saying, quote, I do think many more people should found organizations, end quote, and at the same time championing arguments that discourage doing so. Well, that's enough less wrong for at least a few months. Let's get back to the interview.
I don't know, there's some valid points in the criticism there. There's a lot of valid points. But one of the things I do note is like this, this like academic kind of bias, and also like, I don't know, just bias spotlights, like if you look at the 80,000 hours job board, they typically don't have many of the operations roles. Maybe there aren't that many posted. I could be wrong. But also like the job profiles, the career profiles, seem like stubs for founder for top AI safety, founder for new top programs or projects or whatever. Seems like a stub. Operations, they had an operations one at one point. Seems like a stub. I've been trying to work with them to see if they're interested in this amplifier archetype because I think it is so in demand. It is actually the dominant hiring need in AI safety organizations in the 10 to 30 FTE range. It's the dominant hiring need, and it's like almost as in demand as iterators for the larger companies. So it does seem like there are there's some clear value being left on the table here, and we don't yet have a good training process for amplifiers. I've got an article in the works talking about what that might look like. Though we'll note that like plenty of great amplifiers in the community I think have come through MATS or other field building kind of projects, and I think we do add value there. But that's like a career stepping stone. It's not the same thing as a training program. I think you could have a training program, and it might be like radically different than these current research fellowships because the main, as we say, they're one of the key aspects of an amplifier is that they're relational. Their outcomes are not technical research products. They're benefited humans, so you have to train that skill set in a different way.
And the feedback loop is a lot fuzzier and slower, I think.
Yes, that's true.
So yeah, that's another thing you have to contend with there. You mentioned like large organizations, they want iterators, and you mentioned this in a post as well. I'll have described iterators, so we don't need to go into what that means. But so I think this is useful for sure to have iterators. The maybe concern or issue with having so many iterators is it almost feels like we're training. A friend who I was talking to said like it's like we're training paralegals, not lawyers, and so we'll have tons of paralegals, and that helps the lawyers that do exist sort of like do what they're doing faster, but we don't have enough lawyers or people who are sort of starting and initiating research ideas. Connectors, I think, is the term that you use for it, because it is such a new space, and we really do need to be covering our covering the ground, like you mentioned, way back in the beginning, with you're trying to make sure you have full coverage of these different research avenues and spaces. Are we over-investing in the iterators and doing that before we have enough people who can actually do that, like ideation, connecting, and development?
It's a good question. I think it also might misunderstand what iterator is trying to describe. An iterator is not an engineer who is just kind of executing on a task. An iterator, in my conception of it, is like a pretty empowered individual who has strong research taste, but is executing on that within a paradigm. An example for that is like, I am a physicist. I was a quantum physicist. I was an iterator, right? As a PhD student, I was like taking established, theories of Bose-Einstein condensates and quantum chaos, cold matter physics, and I was trying to make marginal progress by making new hypotheses and testing things in new ways and so on. But I wasn't inventing like new paradigms of science, or I guess maybe I was trying to like do some theory empirics interplay stuff, but I don't think it was like the kind of interdisciplinary knowledge transfer that is archetypal of connectors. So that is what connectors are doing. They're like taking. So when I asked Buck Shulgaris at Redwood like how he would make more people like him, he said, I would probably get them to read a bunch of game theory textbooks, evolutionary biology, history, and psychology. It's like, what?
Yeah.
because that's where he mines his ideas. Notably, his math stream does not do that. He trains iterators typically. There are some people who are good at both, like Alex Turner, as an example. His shard theory and gradient routing, all these things, like very theoretically informed, connector level things. Okay, so I've said my piece about defining these things. I'll say this next. When I talk to people that I consider the archetypal connectors in the field, or even people who are running labs, they make it clear that they do not need more ideas right now, at least with their beliefs about how to make marginal progress in AI safety on the whole. They need people to execute on an overabundance of ideas. So if they're right, then we're doing the right thing. We're making more iterators. There are other people who think, all the ideas we have are bad. There's no way they'll ever work. We can rule them out based on some heuristic, hand-wavy kind of argument. Not to knock heuristic, hand-wavy arguments. Those have been very useful in deciding what directions to pursue. But a lot of people rule these things out and they say, okay, no, we need radically new ideas. Let's just come up with new ideas. And I say to that, how will you know it when you see it? It feels like the level of analysis at which you're ruling out these ideas you could rule out anything. I don't feel like these ideas have been ruled out. I feel like alignment MVPs are still very valid, thing to mine. I think hardcore interpretability, very valid thing to keep iterating on. And notably, people who do Neil Nanna's training program, in the first 10-hour application, they're coming up with original hypotheses and research directions in interpretability. Sure, they're not redefining the field of interpretability in that stage. Maybe they will go on to do that. But I don't think being an iterator is tantamount to being a paralegal at all. It's just much harder to do the kind of ideation and hypothesis testing and so on that iterators do, I think.
Okay, so I think then maybe what I was seeing is a little bit of a disconnect from how you're describing it. The sort of motivation behind this is, I've interacted with a couple people, Matt's alumni in the past, who, I work with Apart Research. We also have a fellowship, and one thing that we've emphasized a lot in that is sort of coming from the participants. And I have found that in one or two cases, a person that has been through Matt's and has really good technical chops, when you get to the point of okay, let's do the research process, so to speak, doing the hypothesis rigorously and testing it and analyzing the results. That isn't there in the extent that I would want it to be to fill that role. And so that's where that question came from. And so then the question is, how do we improve these training processes to make sure that they meet that iterator bar that you are outlining? Because, if they do, I think that's exactly, what it sounds like what you're looking for very intentionally. But then how do we make sure we actually, create the comprehensive iterator or the half iterator or something like that?
The very best Matt's alums, I think, are Matt's mentors. You see a lot of them today. Mm-hmm. They're also running teams at labs. Now, I do think most of the impact of Matt's, most of these in most of these long tail fields, right? Like academia and AI, is going to come from relatively few people. There's if log normal or maybe even Powerwall distributions of research impact. That's just how it is.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So, yeah, and I also often think in terms of program design of Matt's, selection is more impactful than training, right? And sometimes we're going to get selection wrong. But on the whole, I think that we have a pretty low false negative rate. We have a pretty low rate of rejecting people who are really good. But we tend to accept a lot of people from different backgrounds because we value diversity. We want to, we have more money than we, money is not our limitation. Okay, now it feels like I'm pushing blame aside. Okay, so let's actually talk about what Matt's tries to do for instilling research taste, what it could do better. Okay, so basically what we do for research taste is we require people to pass milestones. Okay, so we have like a mid-program milestone that is effectively gates entry into our extension phase, and is like the largest component by which we gate entry, other than mentor, feedback, and is also used heavily in our later recommendations to jobs and so on, because we do offer references and that kind of thing. People frequently ask us, and we tell our fellows, people often will ask us, who should we hire? And if you do well in Mats, if you give us like good data, then we can like recommend you. If not, we can't. We can't really do that. So they have some incentive to perform well at these checkpoints. And this checkpoint of a research plan, while it isn't like the best thing in the world, we kind of basically built this thing historically to be this mid-program checkpoint where they put in their theory of change for their research, right? Their proposed plan. And the threat model of AI safety this is actually trying to target. And we've iterated on this many times over the years, but it's sort of like our MVP of assessing a person's ability to conceive of like the reasoning behind their research and justify that. And it has like helped us to select some people for the extension historically, and provided like just general credibility for our ability to assess fellows. But I guess there are substantial differences among mentors in the degree of support that they provide in terms of how to do hypothesizing and ideation and that kind of thing. We have workshops on this, and we have seminars with leading researchers, but you really can't make up for, like in academia, you can't make up for like whether a mentor is really great and is going to give you all the tools or not.
Yeah.
But I will say there's some people who they make their own way. Some people have supervisors who are absent and PhDs, and they just work out how to do this sort of thing. So I think the key thing here ultimately is more reps, right? Whether you're really good or bad, whether you have a great supervisor or bad supervisor, having more shots like on goal in terms of creating interesting hypotheses and then testing them, see if it pans out, and working out what was right. This is the main way to build up your research taste, and Mats is trying to provide that. In terms of having large programs with, some feedback loop process there. And yeah, like it's I don't know. Like I've read a lot of literature on how to build research tastes, and I don't feel that there is a very solid pedagogy here, unfortunately.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think that's, I mean, as far as I understand, like that's why the PhD exists, and that's why that's sort of what's been done for such a long time. Is like the best way to do it is to get someone who knows how to do it, and then they watch you while you do it a bunch of times, and you take shots on goal, and they give you pointers, but like really it's more about you just doing it and developing that over time, and not falling into like a bad habit along the way, which is what that other person helps with. So I think that makes sense. I think there's got to be a way to improve this. Like on this sort of method, and I think that programs like Matt's are a way towards that. The last thing that I want to make sure we touch on is, you've mentioned in previous, I think, a talk and also writing, that you and therefore Matt's want to focus on existential risk reduction specifically. And so then my sort of next step is, okay, but if you're in the business of having a wide tent and trying to get as many people involved as possible, at least in terms of the entrance, why make that distinction? What's the reasoning behind that? And just providing a little bit of context around that.
Yeah, good question again. So first off, I'll say we don't support reducing existential, or as we like to say now, catastrophic risk to the exclusion of all other theories of change. We do have mentors in the program who are working on digital sentience research. We have people who are working on we have over time had people working on gradualist empowerment kind of things, risks from totalitarian uses of AI and so on. and of course, most recently, Will McCaskill working on flourishing as well. So these do feature in the portfolio, and they are part of our whole portfolio approach. So when I say catastrophic existential risk, I would say this is like the central, I guess, thing we are targeting, because it seems like the biggest bad in many ways. Now, there's plenty of disagreement here, right? There are people who think this is not very important. There are people who think it is like important, but perhaps on par with risks from totalitarian use of AI. And to them, I would say, like, well, look at the portfolio of research Mats is covering. Does it seem to you like this research only pays off in scenarios where AI is an existential risk? Like the oversight control, the evals, including for CBRN, chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear weapons, like the sycophancy evals, interpretability in general. No, I think all of this research, almost everything we do that is trying to like reduce the risks of catastrophic AI harms, actually pays off in a bunch of scenarios where AI never harms people, because it just makes AIs more trustworthy, more robust, reliable, like less likely to cause small harms and so on. So I think aiming for the moon, shooting for the stars kind of approach is valid here. Try and target the hardest thing, and along the way, try and like have an impact in all the other worlds where the worst case scenario doesn't happen. I think it's very fortunate that we can in fact have this kind of portfolio. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, it does. And I think something that I am on the record for saying is like, yeah, well, if we resolve certain issues, we don't ever get to the issues that a subset of people are worried about. And it sounds like that is in line with what you're saying as well. And so that also helps me and helps provide context for why you choose the research directions you do, and that there is a lot of coverage. It's not just one agenda or 2 or 3 agendas. It's a lot of theories of change. It's a lot of ways to go about that. And as you've been scaling, you've been able to cover more of that, which I think is awesome. And do you have like a couple more minutes to do a lightning round?
Yeah, let's do it.
So the first one is, what's overhyped in AI safety right now?
Maybe I don't know, security and governance or something. Yeah, that's some spicy take. Yeah.
Brief reasoning, just like one sentence.
Yeah. The market will provide for most AI security things, and
okay.
AI governance only matters if the administration cares enough to implement your governance policies.
Yeah, that is too real. All right. What needs more attention then, or resources?
I think a certain type of multi-agent or cooperative AI is very neglected and very important to work on. And the reason is because we are soon going to be in situations where people build AI agent economies or infrastructures, like an agent based company, or people leverage many teams of AI agents working together.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. So at this point, you've trained hundreds of people. What's the pattern that you see in the people who actually make it versus those who don't? Is there a pattern? Is it predictable at all?
Okay, I could be really trite here and say it's like conscientiousness trait. The main predictor of success among personality metrics. But I think that is like maybe I've internalized a model and I'm projecting that. But I do see the people who've really succeeded are extremely hardworking. So it's people who just they keep failing, but then they keep going. They learn from their mistakes and they keep trying. And they don't get discouraged from, failure. They pick up again and start the next thing. Be it a research hypothesis, because you're going to fail so many times in your research journey. You're going to fail at hypotheses. Most startups fail. most startup founders have failed startups before their one succeeded, and every other career too.
Mm-hmm.
Many rejections and applications and so on.
Yeah, I have a friend. He's actually the co-host of my other podcast, who's like, research isn't about finding the successes. It's about killing your babies, which is another like phrase that I've heard in startups as well. And I think that's a good way to think it. Like, yeah, this is gonna suck. This is gonna be hard. We're gonna have a lot of failures to get to the successes. And sometimes that's not the case. Sometimes you'll luck out, but usually it's gonna take a lot of effort.
I think a Stoic philosophy is good here. It's about the process, not about the destination.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And then next one is, what's the most common misconception people have about what it takes to contribute to AI safety? What do you wish you could tell every applicant about before they apply?
The most common misconception. Oh boy. I guess the most common misconception is that you have to be of like a very particular mold. People seem to think that Matt's is, like, because the acceptance rate is like 7% or something, like it's super hard to get into. The kind of individual that succeeds in AI safety, maybe not the person that gets highlighted on the 80K podcast or other types of things, but most people who get employed and have impact in AI safety, like, there are just a variety of different types of people there, in terms of backgrounds and their specific talent archetypes. There are people who, like, their first paper, they're undergrads and they joined Matt's or some other program like Hoagie Cunningham, and like their first paper was an incredible smash hit, that exceeded all expectations. Or there are people who are like, hey, I'm like 55, or like some of our team members are in their late 50s, early 60s, and they just like pivoted from very long, exceptional careers, and are interested to work in AI safety now. There are jobs for everybody potentially.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a big one. Is like, don't discount your expertise, your competitive advantage, because oftentimes there's a way that it is unique and valuable for AI safety. Like, we need all kinds, I guess, to make AI safety AI safer, I guess. So I think that's a big one. And like, don't discount yourself before getting in there.
Because the goal isn't just making AI safe, right? That's like the first. That's just the starting point, right? It's making AI safe, and then making, the future one in which there's abundant flourishing for all people. And this process requires all people because it impacts all people.
Yeah. All right. Last two questions. First one is, what is the part about your work that like grinds your gears, gets you irritated, you don't like doing? What's the part that it's just like, oh man, I gotta do it again? What is that for you?
Oh man, I really, performance reviews and letting people go suck. Some performance reviews are great, but like delivering negative performance reviews, that is a painful process. Sometimes there's tears involved, and it's just like you have to be very empathetic and hold their needs, but also hold the organization's needs, right? Paramount. It's a tough process.
Yeah. And then last question: if someone is listening and they're thinking, I want to work in AI safety, but I don't know how, what's the actual honest advice you give them? It doesn't have to be polite. It's like the real version that you think will actually be valuable to them.
I would say stop anchoring on timelines. If you're asking the question like, how can I be useful in AI safety? Stop thinking, oh my God, AI is going to come in 2027. What can I do? No, just say, dude, like, maybe your work doesn't matter before 2027. that's possible, right? Many people, can pivot right now, and because they have like tons of experience, or they have the opportunities to pivot right now to work that impacts AI safety, given AGI arrives in 2027. Many more people don't have that opportunity, and they have a longer lead time. But if they start today, they can definitely become a person that is going to be hugely impactful if AGI arrives in 2033, which, by the way, is the median metaculus estimate. That's almost 8 years away. You got a lot of time. You could do a PhD in that time. You could get a job in Congress or something. Well, maybe not a congressperson, but supporting the Congress or the White House. There's actually a lot of time for these longer timeline worlds. So don't worry so much about early AGI scenarios if you don't think you actually have the capacity to be maximally impactful in those scenarios. Anchor on longer timeline scenarios. Give yourself time to achieve and build yourself up and acquire stability. Because half of all futures, right, have AGI arrive after 2033. We need people for those futures. More people, probably, because AI is going to be even bigger.
Half of all metaculus predictors.
Sure.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate you taking the time. I think this was great, and I will... I hope this is helpful to Mats as well.
I'm sure it will be. Thank you so much, Jacob. It's been great.
While the applications for the summer 2026 Mats program have just closed, there will be another round in the near future, so do keep an eye out on their future calls, or apply for being a mentor if you think you're a good fit. As always, thank you for listening. If you found this interview insightful or valuable, please let me know. However you want to, please. I really appreciate the feedback, positive and negative. Maybe it's not the most fun sign-off I've ever done, but given when I'm recording this, I really can't think of anything else more important to say. Stay safe, fight fascism, and I'll see you next time.